Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Confessions. Buckle up, because this one still makes my hands shake when I think about it. It started with a phone call I didn't answer. Not because I couldn't, but because I saw the name on the screen and felt something twist in my gut. Curtis, my wife's ex. I didn't even know they still had each other's numbers. By the time I finally worked up the nerve to listen to the voicemail, it was too late. The damage was already done. His voice was casual, almost smug. Hey man, just letting you know Marlene's fine. She's here. Probably gonna crash for the night. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I swear I could hear people laughing in the background. Music thumping like a heartbeat I couldn't control. My wife hadn't texted, hadn't called. And now her ex was the one giving me updates, like I was some clueless neighbor who'd left my dog with him for the weekend. I called her. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text, then another, then 3 more. Nothing. Hours passed, and my imagination worked overtime. Was she drunk? Was she ignoring me? Or was she leaning on him the same way she used to lean on me, smiling in that way that made me forget every flaw she had? The thing is, this wasn't coming out of nowhere. We'd had a fight 2 days earlier, a stupid, bitter fight where she accused me of being pathetic and never standing up for myself. I'd laughed it off at the time, but now I was starting to think she'd meant every word, and this little sleepover was her way of proving her point. By the time the sun came up, I'd made coffee I didn't drink and stared at the door like it might confess something if I glared hard enough. My phone finally buzzed at 9:17 a.m. A text from her. For words, I'll be home soon. But here's the thing. By then, I'd already decided what I was going to do. And when she walked back into our house, she wasn't going to find the man she'd left behind the night before. When the door finally opened, Marlene stepped inside like nothing in the world could possibly be wrong. She didn't even look at me right away, just tossed her purse onto the counter, kicked off her shoes, and let out this fake little sigh, the kind people do when they want you to ask what's wrong. Except I didn't ask. I didn't move. I just sat at the table, hands folded, watching her like she was a stranger who'd wandered into my home by mistake. It took her a few seconds to notice the silence. Her eyes flicked to me, then around the room, and I could see her taking in the details. The pictures on the wall were gone. The decorative shelf she loved, empty. Her favorite mug wasn't on the counter anymore. All the little things that made the house hers had vanished overnight. Where's my stuff? She asked, her voice already sharpening. In a safe place, I said quietly. That caught her off guard. She tilted her head, that smug little smile forming. What is this, some kind of tantrum? You're mad because I stayed at a party? I didn't answer right away. I wanted her to sit in the quiet, the same quiet I'd sat in all night while she was out with him. I could tell it was making her nervous, even though she tried to hide it. She walked toward the kitchen, probably expecting to grab a coffee, and stopped dead when she opened the cupboard, empty. No mugs, no glasses. I'd cleared them all out. She spun around. What's going on, Ethan? Finally, I looked up at her. I heard from Curtis last night. The color drained from her face faster than I expected. She tried to recover, rolling her eyes like it was nothing, but her voice had lost that cocky edge. Oh, for God's sake. He was just being nice, letting you know I was safe. Safe? I let out a humorless laugh. Safe from what, Marlene? From me? Or from the idea that maybe you've gone too far this time? For a second, there was no sound except the hum of the fridge. She didn't have a comeback ready, and that told me more than any argument could. I'd spent the night removing every trace of her from the house. Not because I was kicking her out just yet, but because I wanted her to feel what it was like to be on the outside of her own life. You think you can scare me by moving my stuff? She said finally, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. I stood up, slowly, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had the upper hand. No, Marlene, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just making sure that when you decide where you really belong, you understand that this, I gestured around the room, stripped bare of her things, is what you left behind. Her mouth opened like she was going to say something sharp, but nothing came out. She just stood there, eyes darting around the room, realizing she no longer recognized it. And that was only the beginning of what I had planned. Marlene stood in the middle of the stripped-down living room, arms folded like she was trying to project confidence, but her eyes kept moving. They weren't focused on me. They were darting around like she was scanning for something familiar to hold on to. There wasn't anything left for her to find. I'd made sure of that. I could see her piecing it together. The missing photos, The bare shelves, the empty cupboards. It wasn't just a cleaning spree. This was deliberate. And she hated not knowing exactly why I'd done it. She broke the silence first. You're being ridiculous. All this because I didn't come home? Because I stayed over at a friend's? You stayed over at your ex's, I corrected. My voice was calm, almost too calm, which seemed to unnerve her more than if I'd been shouting. And you didn't even bother to tell me. You had him call me like I was some errand boy waiting for instructions. She rolled her eyes, but there was a crack in her performance now. Curtis was just trying to be polite. It's not like anything happened. Really, I leaned back against the counter, studying her reaction. Because from what I heard, you were laughing about getting back at me all night. Funny thing, though, you never mentioned what I supposedly did to deserve it. Her expression flickered, just for a second, into something sharper. She knew exactly what I was referring to, but she wasn't going to hand me the satisfaction of admitting it. Instead, she tried to flip the script. So you're going to play the victim now? Poor Ethan, sitting at home while me and Marlene has a drink with an old friend? That's the thing about Marlene. When she's caught, she doesn't apologize. She attacks. But this time, I didn't bite. I didn't argue. I just walked over to the front door, opened it, and stepped aside. If it was just a drink with an old friend, you won't mind leaving for a while. I've already arranged a place for you to stay. Your things are there. You won't have to see me until you decide what story you're going to stick to. The confidence drained from her face, replaced by something closer to panic. You're actually kicking me out? Over nothing? It's not nothing, Marlene. It's a pattern, and I think you've gotten too comfortable thinking there'd never be consequences. She didn't move toward the door, but she didn't move toward me either. She was frozen, torn between outrage and uncertainty. That was the first time in years I'd seen her unsure of herself, and I wasn't about to let that advantage go. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know yet, was that I'd already taken steps she couldn't undo with a sweet smile or a half-hearted apology. When she finally saw what I'd done, the little bit of control she thought she still had would be gone completely. Marlene didn't walk toward the door at first. She lingered there like someone who'd stepped onto a frozen lake and just heard it groan under their weight. Her arms were still crossed, but her shoulders had dropped, and her eyes were calculating, searching for the right angle to hit me with. She'd always been quick on her feet in an argument, able to twist the narrative until I was the one apologizing. But this time I wasn't giving her any footholds. I stayed leaning against the counter, watching her quietly, letting the seconds stretch until they felt heavier than words. Finally, she took a step toward me, voice softening into the tone she used when she wanted to be forgiven without actually admitting she'd done anything wrong. Ethan, come on, you're overreacting. You know me. I wouldn't do anything stupid. She glanced down, her lips tightening for half a beat before she added, not in a way that matters. That last part was her slip, like she couldn't help but admit there was something to forgive, even if she wanted to downplay it. I didn't reply. I just reached over to the side table, picked up a small, sealed envelope, and set it on the counter in front of her. Her eyes dropped to it, and I could tell she recognized the handwriting instantly. It wasn't mine. It was hers. She froze. Where did you get that? You left it in the desk drawer, I said, my voice steady. Unsealed. I guess you forgot you'd written it. Her breathing changed, shorter, sharper. That's private. It was addressed to Curtis. I continued, ignoring the jab, and it explained exactly why you were going to spend the night with him. You even mentioned wanting me to find out one way or another. She reached for the envelope, but I pulled it back before she could touch it. The sudden frustration that crossed her face wasn't just about the letter. It was about losing control of the situation she thought she'd orchestrated. You think you're clever, she said finally, her voice dropping to a low, cold tone. But you're not as unpredictable as you think. I know you, Ethan. You're not going to do anything drastic. You never do. That was the moment I realized she still didn't believe I could surprise her. That even now, with her things packed away and her little secret letter in my hand, she thought she was reading the last chapter of a story she'd already written. I stepped closer, holding the envelope between two fingers. You might want to keep telling yourself that, I said, because if you let yourself imagine what I'm actually planning, you won't sleep tonight. Her jaw tightened. She tried to mask it with a smirk, but I saw the flicker of unease. She turned, grabbed her purse, and walked toward the door without another word. But I noticed the stiffness in her movements. She might have been leaving like she wanted to look in control, yet everything about her body language told me she was going to spend the entire night wondering what I had up my sleeve. What she didn't realize was that my plan was already set in motion, and by the time she figured it out, she'd realized there was no way to reverse it. I didn't hear from Marlene for the rest of the day. No texts, no calls, just silence. I figured she was trying to prove she didn't care, probably waiting me out until I cracked and asked her to come back. But I wasn't the one under pressure this time. I knew exactly where she was, and more importantly, I knew exactly what she was about to find. I had left her things in a safe place, like I told her, but I hadn't told her that the safe place was her sister's house. A sister she hadn't spoken to in nearly a year after a massive fight over an inheritance. It wasn't just about moving her belongings. It was about putting them somewhere that would instantly reopen old wounds. And that was only step one. By early evening, I got my first sign that she'd found them. My phone buzzed, not from Marlene, but from her sister, Denise. The message was short but scathing. "You really dropped her stuff off here? I'm not your storage unit, Ethan." I didn't respond. I just sat back and pictured the scene. Marlene showing up, realizing she had to face Denise before she could get to a single box. Both of them standing there with arms folded, trading years of pent-up resentment while my wife tried to act like she wasn't shaken. But the real trigger was waiting inside one of those boxes. I'd slipped an unmarked envelope between her clothes, and inside it was a single printed sheet, a copy of a message thread I'd found months ago and kept to myself. It was between her and Curtis, filled with half-teasing, half-flirtatious remarks that weren't quite damning enough to start a war back then. But now, in the middle of all this, it was enough to make her sweat. I knew she'd assume I'd sent copies to more than just her. Sure enough, just after midnight, my phone finally lit up with her name. I let it ring twice before answering, making sure she knew I wasn't sitting around waiting for her. Her voice was sharp, like she was trying to keep her anger ahead of her fear. "Where did you get that? And who else have you shown it to?" I didn't give her the reassurance she was looking for. "Don't worry about where I got it. Worry about why you thought I'd never see it." "You're playing games now," she snapped, but there was a tremor in her voice. "You want to humiliate me, is that it?" I stayed quiet for a moment, just long enough for her to start filling the silence with nervous breathing. "No," I said finally. "If I wanted to humiliate you, I'd have sent that to your parents by now. This isn't about making you look bad. This is about making you understand what it feels like to have no idea what the other person is going to do next." There was nothing from her for a few seconds. No clever comeback. No fake laugh. Just the faint sound of her exhaling slowly, like she was realizing she wasn't sure how far I was willing to take this. She tried to cover it with a scoff, but it was too late. I'd heard that small shift in her breathing before, when she was cornered and didn't know how to spin her way out. "Enjoy your little power trip," she said finally. "It won't last." Then she hung up. She was wrong about that. The first domino had already fallen, and she had no idea how many more were lined up behind it. The next one would fall without me even having to lift a finger, and it would happen in front of people she really didn't want involved. 2 days passed without a single word from Marlene. I could picture her pacing somewhere, probably in Curtis's apartment, trying to convince herself she still had control over the narrative. That was her specialty, deciding what the story was and making everyone else play their roles. But what she didn't know was that the next hit wasn't going to come from me directly. I'd already set something in motion that would make her realize other people were starting to connect the dots, and she couldn't spin her way out of this one. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my office at home when my phone buzzed with a message from one of our mutual friends, Tessa. She and Marlene had been close for years, until Tessa's fiancé caught Marlene gossiping about him at a wedding reception. Since then, their friendship had been nothing more than a polite exchange in group settings. The text from Tessa read, "Wow. So, she's just doing it openly now?" I played dumb. "What are you talking about?" A minute later, my phone lit up with a video clip. It wasn't grainy or blurry. It was clear enough to show everything. Marlene, standing in the middle of a crowded backyard, drink in one hand, leaning far too close to Curtis. He said something in her ear, and she laughed, putting her hand on his chest in that way she used to do with me when she wanted everyone to know I was hers. The person filming must have known exactly what they were capturing, because the camera lingered just long enough for anyone watching to understand the dynamic. And here's the best part. It wasn't Tessa who filmed it. Someone else had posted it to a local events page, tagging Curtis and a few other people, which meant it wasn't just me who could see it. This was public. Anyone could click on it, pause it, and replay it. I didn't send the clip to Marlene. I didn't have to. Within hours, I got a string of frantic texts from her, each more disjointed than the last. Why didn't you tell me about that video? You better not be sharing it around. Don't you dare use this to make me look bad. I waited until evening to respond, keeping it simple. You're worried about how you look? Maybe you should have thought about that before the cameras came out. Her reply came fast, a mixture of anger and desperation. Ethan, listen to me. This isn't what it looks like. We were just talking. I can explain. I didn't answer. Instead, I let her stew in the knowledge that people, friends, acquaintances, maybe even family, were watching and forming their own opinions without me saying a single word. It wasn't my voice turning them against her. It was her own actions, replayed on strangers' screens. And this was only the beginning of the audience she was about to get. Because the next thing I had lined up, well, it wouldn't just be a random clip floating around online. It would be a situation she'd have to face in person, with no way to walk out without leaving a trail of whispers behind her. The invitation had gone out weeks earlier, before any of this started, a retirement party for Marlene's former boss. It was the kind of event she loved, a room full of people she could charm, old colleagues to impress, and just enough formality to make it feel important. She'd been talking about it for months, already planning what to wear. But now, with the video still quietly circulating online and whispers starting to find their way back to her, I knew showing up there would be a test she couldn't pass. I didn't have to push her toward the fire. She was already walking straight into it. I got there first, early enough to watch people arrive and see how they reacted when they spotted me. Some smiled politely, some avoided eye contact, and a few looked like they wanted to ask me something but didn't know how to start. I made a point of looking calm, even friendly, greeting anyone who approached me without offering more than surface-level conversation. The less I said, the more they'd wonder what I wasn't saying. When Marlene finally walked in, I saw the exact second her confidence faltered. She stepped through the doorway, smiling too broadly, scanning the room for familiar faces, and then she noticed me standing by the bar. For a moment, she froze. Her eyes darted to a small group of women in the corner, women who had been talking quietly, but now weren't even pretending not to watch her. She glanced at the bar, then back to the women, and I could tell she was already trying to calculate who had seen the video and who hadn't. I didn't approach her. I didn't need to. I just raised my glass slightly in acknowledgement and went back to my conversation with a man I barely knew. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her making the rounds, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, her energy frantic in a way only I could spot. Every time she turned, she seemed to catch another pair of eyes on her, and every time, her smile stiffened just a little more. Half an hour in, I noticed Denise, her sister, walking through the crowd. I hadn't invited her, but apparently, someone else had. The tension in Marlene's face when she spotted her was almost cinematic. Denise didn't even glance in my direction. She walked straight up to Marlene and said something I couldn't hear over the music, but I could see the effect immediately. Marlene's jaw tightened, her head shaking quickly in denial. Denise smiled. Not a warm smile, but the kind that says, I know exactly what you're trying to hide. Within minutes, more people were joining their conversation, the circle tightening around her. I stayed where I was, letting it play out. The beauty of it was, I hadn't said a single word to anyone about what had happened. I didn't have to. Her own behavior, the tension in her body language, and whatever Denise was subtly feeding into the group were doing all the work for me. By the time Marlene finally broke away from them and came toward me, I could see the cracks in her composure widening. Her smile was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped expression that barely disguised the frustration burning underneath. We need to talk, she said through her teeth. I sipped my drink. Then talk. Not here, she snapped, glancing over her shoulder like she was afraid someone might overhear. I didn't move. Why not? You've already got an audience. That was when she realized I wasn't going to give her the privacy she wanted. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't have a plan for what to do next. Marlene followed me outside, away from the music and chatter, her heels clicking against the pavement like the sound of a clock running out. She stopped in front of me, arms folded tight across her chest. You've made your point, she said, trying to sound in control. Everyone in there is looking at me like I'm guilty of something. Are you happy now? I shook my head. No, Marlene. I'm not happy you're embarrassed. I'm happy you finally understand how it feels to have other people's version of the story controlling how you're seen. She started to protest, but I cut her off. This isn't revenge. I'm done playing the guy who waits at home wondering where you are, who you're with, and what you're telling people about me. That's not my life anymore. You can stay in that cycle if you want, but I'm stepping out of it. For the first time in days, she didn't have a comeback. She just stood there, breathing slowly, like the weight of everything had finally hit her. I handed her the envelope, the same one I'd taken from her that morning in the kitchen, and said, "This belongs to you. And so does the next choice you make. I'm done making them for you." I walked away without looking back, heading to my car and feeling the quiet settle over me in a way that wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. Free. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small or overlooked. I didn't feel like I had to keep proving I mattered. I just mattered because I decided I did. A week later, I'd moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. No drama, no late-night calls, no carefully staged social media photos designed to spark jealousy. Just me, my own space, and a new start that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. Sometimes, you don't get the closure you expect. You get something better, the peace of knowing you finally drew the line and kept it there. And that's where I'll leave it. So what do you think? Have you ever been in a situation where walking away was the most powerful thing you could do? Share your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And if you enjoyed this one, make sure to subscribe to Reddit Confessions for more real-life tales like this one.